A pound coin in your pocket in the 1970s? You were practically loaded. That single note could get you a decent meal, a new album, a night out with the lads. Today, you can barely get a coffee for that. We've dug up 20 things that a quid bought you back then, and what you'd need to spend now might make you weep into your tea. A full packet of 40 cigarettes for a quid. 40. Whether you fancied Embassy, Silk Cut, or Benson and Hedges, you were smoking like a chimney all week for that price. That's roughly 8 pence per cigarette, and everyone did it without a second thought. Nowadays, a single packet of 20 will set you back 8 or 9 quid, sometimes more depending on the brand. The price has gone up tenfold in 50 years, and it's all those tobacco taxes and health warnings. Fair enough, really. But back then, smoking was cheap, cheerful, and absolutely everywhere. You'd buy your 40 smokes, stick them in your shirt pocket, and feel like you were set for days. Six proper pints of bitter or mild at your local boozer for £1. Not the fancy craft stuff, just an honest pint of whatever they had on tap, served by a bloke who knew your name and your usual. The pub was packed most nights, full of workers fresh from their shift, loosening their ties and having a proper laugh. Today, you're lucky if you get 2 pints for £1 in most places, and in London or any decent-sized city, you might only get 1. The local has changed too. Fewer people popping in for a quick one after work, more suits on their phones. But in the 70s, 6 quid's worth of pints meant a proper night out with your mates, and you'd still have change for a packet of crisps and a joke box on the corner. A family shop at the supermarket for £1 would get you bread, milk, eggs, butter, tea, sugar, and some veg. Not luxuries, but the staples that kept a household fed. A loaf of bread was 2p, milk was a few pence, eggs were dead cheap because they came straight from farms. You'd come home with carrier bags full, and your mum would have enough for a week of proper meals. Fast forward to now, and that same weekly shop costs you anywhere from £30 to £50, depending on what you're buying and where you shop. Inflation's hit food hard, especially fresh produce. But in the 70s, money stretched further, and a family could eat decently without worrying about the pennies. The corner shop and the market were still going strong too, and prices were reasonable all round. A crisp new paperback from Penguin or Pan for around £1 to 18 pence, well under £1. Authors like Agatha Christie, Len Deighton or Alistair MacLean, all available for pocket money prices. The covers were brilliant too, with proper artwork and that distinctive coloured spine that made them look classy on your shelf. People bought books all the time because they were affordable, and reading was entertainment before telly really took over. Now, a paperback novel will cost you 8 or 9 quid at Waterstones, and that's without a discount. People have turned to libraries and used books instead, but back then, buying a new book was something you could do on a whim. The high street was full of bookshops, and people actually read for fun without feeling like they were spending a fortune. A proper barber's haircut for around 4 and 6p to 8 shillings, well under £1. You'd go to the barber shop on a Saturday morning, sit in the chair and get a proper trim with scissors and razor, not these modern clipper cuts. The barber knew how to work with your hair, and he'd take his time. Maybe a quick shampoo, a bit of Brile cream, and you'd walk out looking sharp as a tack. Today, you're lucky to get a haircut for 15 quid, and that's at a basic high street place. Proper barbers have made a comeback, but they're trendy now, and charge 30 or 40 quid for the same thing. In the 70s, looking presentable didn't cost you much, and men would pop to the barber every 3 weeks or so without it being a financial commitment. It was just part of life, like getting a pint. Three full gallons of petrol for £1, that's roughly 12 litres. You could drive across half the country on that tank for the price of a quid. People drove everywhere without a care because fuel was dead cheap. Your old Ford Cortina or Austin Marina could run on pocket change. and the motorways were packed with families heading off for seaside holidays because they could afford the petrol. Now, 3 gallons cost you about 25 to 30 quid, depending on where you fill up and what the international oil prices are doing. That's meant fewer leisure drives, more careful planning, and families thinking twice before a trip to the coast. In the 70s, petrol was one of those things you barely thought about. You just filled up and got on with it. The world felt bigger then because you could actually afford to drive around it. A beautiful piece of fresh fish from the fishmonger, a whole mackerel, salmon fillet, or a couple of dozen cockles or mussels for less than £1. The fishmonger was a proper trade back then, with shops in every town centre, and they'd clean and fillet your fish while you waited. Fish was everyday food, not the luxury it's become. Families ate fish on Fridays, and you'd get decent quality for nothing. Today, that same piece of fish costs you 5 or 6 quid at Tesco, and that's not even the fancy stuff. Proper fishmongers have all but disappeared from the high street, and what's left charges premium prices. In the 70s, eating well and eating cheaply went hand in hand. Fish wasn't exotic, it was dinner. A complete suit from Burton's, the menswear chain, for somewhere between £12 to £15, so you could get it on layaway for a few shillings a week. That's talking jacket, waistcoat and trousers in wool twill, properly tailored. It wouldn't be the finest suiting, but it was solid, hard-wearing stuff that would last you years with proper care. A suit for that price today? Impossible. You're looking at minimum 150 quid for something decent and often more. Burton's was the place where working men bought their wedding suits, their interview gear, the clothes that mattered. The tailors knew their job, and alterations were included. In the 70s, every man had a suit or two, and you didn't need to spend a fortune to look presentable. Quality was built into the fabric, not the label. A brand new 45 single for 3 shillings, or an album for around 4 or 5 bob, well under a quid for most records. You could buy 20 singles for £1 if you were smart about it, picking up the B-sides and older releases. Record shops were everywhere, and people collected records like they collect apps today. David Bowie, Slade, T-Rex, all available for 2p or 3p at the second-hand stall. Today, vinyls come back, but a new album will cost you 12 to 15 quid, and a single's basically extinct for that price. Music streaming's changed everything, but back then, owning music meant buying records. Your record collection was who you were, and £1 went a long way when you were building it. The smell of a new record, the sleeve notes, the artwork. You were getting value for money. A proper pair of leather shoes from the Co-op or a department store for around 8 to 12 shillings, nearly a quid. Not fancy, but solid footwear that would last you through a year or two of proper wear. Brogues, Oxfords, work boots, all available for less than £1. Cobblers would repair them too, stitching new soles or heel taps for a few shillings. Today, a decent pair of shoes costs you 40 to 60 quid, and they fall apart after a season. People used to expect shoes to last, and manufacturers built them to do so. In the 70s, your shoes were an investment that paid off. You bought a pair, looked after them, got them repaired when needed, and wore them for years. Throwaway fashion hadn't really kicked in yet. A beautiful joint of beef or lamb from the butcher for around 18 shillings to 20 shillings, just under £1. That's enough for 4 people with gravy and vegetables included in the cost of the meat. The butcher would trim it for you, give you advice on cooking times, and throw in the bones for stock. A Sunday roast was normal family eating, not a special treat, because meat was affordable and quality was guaranteed. Now that same roast costs you 12 to 15 quid, and you're not getting better meat, just smaller portions and factory farming. The local butchers mostly vanished, replaced by supermarket counters that don't know your name or your preferences. In the 70s, eating well was just what you did. It wasn't a luxury or a special occasion. Sunday dinner was sacred and it didn't cost the earth. A proper pair of Levi's 501s or 505s for around £1.50 to £2, so nearly a quid for top-quality American denim. These were the jeans that lasted forever, that you'd wear in and break in over years, that would eventually fit you perfectly. Kids would beg their parents for Levi's because they were the real deal, and even though they cost a bit, you knew you were getting quality. Today, Levi's cost you 50 to 70 quid a pair, and they're not necessarily any better than they were 50 years ago. Fast fashions meant that jeans are disposable now. You wear them a season or two and toss them. But back then, a pair of jeans was supposed to be your best mate, something that improved with age and wear. People treated them with respect, and they lasted. A full week at a British holiday camp like Butlins or Pontans for somewhere around £3 to £5 for a family, so you could nearly do it for the price of £5 if you were careful. That included your chalet, your meals, entertainment every night, and access to all the facilities. Families would save all year for a week at Butlins, and it was the holiday of a lifetime. Today, a week at a holiday park costs you 200 to 400 quid, and the experience isn't necessarily any better. Butlins is still going, but it's pricey now, more of a nostalgia trip than the budget option it once was. In the 70s, even working-class families could afford a proper week away, and that mattered. It created memories, brought families together, and made you feel like you could afford a bit of luxury. A reliable Ronson or Zippo lighter for a shilling or thereabouts, so a quid would buy you 20 cheap lighters or 3 or 4 decent ones. People went through lighters like nobody's business back then, leaving them in pubs, at work, giving them away. They were disposable luxury items that cost next to nothing. Lighters today cost you 5 or 6 quid for a decent one, and people hold on to them like they're made of gold. Back then, you could leave a lighter behind without caring. Just buy another one when you next saw a tobacconist. Smoking culture created a whole ecosystem of cheap accessories that everyone bought and nobody valued. The disposability of it all meant lighters were everywhere, in every pocket, on every mantelpiece. The annual television license was around £12 in the early 70s, so paying for it monthly was about a quid. That gave you access to the BBC and, later, BBC Two, plus all of ITV. Everything on telly was basically covered by that one licence. Today, the annual licence is around £160, and while it still feels relatively cheap, it hasn't kept pace with inflation in other areas. But back then, £1 a month for all your entertainment felt like brilliant value. The telly was the centrepiece of family life, and for that small amount, you got hours and hours of shows, news, and entertainment. People didn't resent paying it, because it genuinely felt like good value. The principle was different too. The licence was about funding quality British broadcasting, not about ads or streaming subscriptions. Turkey, stuffing, veg, and all the trimmings from a good butcher for around 30 to 40 shillings, well under 2 quid for a decent family feast. Christmas dinner was an affordable way to have something special without spending big money. The butcher would have turkeys at reasonable prices right up until Christmas Eve, and you could get everything you needed to make a proper dinner for a family of 4 or 5. Now, that same Christmas dinner costs you 15 to 20 quid, and you're buying from supermarkets where the prices are set. In the 70s, you could have a proper Christmas feast on a working man's wage. It was a reasonable expense, not a financial commitment. That's changed, and Christmas has become more expensive in real terms than it was back then. If you had oil heating, 10 gallons of heating oil cost you around a quid, enough to keep you warm through a decent chunk of winter. Heating costs were manageable, and you didn't have to choose between eating and staying warm like some families do today. Gas was cheap too, and electricity was reasonable. People heated their homes without worrying about it being a luxury expense. Today, heating oil costs you well over £1 per gallon, and the cost of heating a home through winter can run to hundreds of quid. energy prices have skyrocketed in real terms, making comfort something you have to budget for carefully. In the 70s, warmth was an expectation, not a luxury, and it didn't cost a fortune to stay comfortable. A quality mechanical watch from Timex, Seiko, or even a basic gold-plated dress watch from Omega or Bulova for somewhere around £8 to £12, so nearly a quid for an entry-level timepiece. Watches were something you kept forever, serviced regularly, and passed down to your son. They were tools that told the time reliably and made you look presentable. Today, a decent watch costs you minimum 50 to 100 quid, and because we all have phones, watches are now about fashion or luxury rather than function. In the 70s, every man had a watch, and it was a serious purchase, something that mattered. You'd take it to the jeweler for repairs, and it would last your lifetime if you looked after it. A pouch of rolling tobacco, old Holborn, Drum or Sampson, for around 4 and 6pence to 8 shillings, so you could get a week's worth of smokes for less than a quid if you rolled your own. Rolling your own was dead common, and it saved you money. People would sit in front of the telly with their tobacco pouch and papers, rolling smokes by the dozen. It was cheaper than buying made-up cigarettes, and some blokes swore it tasted better. Today, rolling tobacco costs you 6 or 7 quid a pouch, and you're not necessarily getting more tobacco, you're just paying more inflation. People still roll their own to save money, but it's become less common because the savings aren't as dramatic. In the 70s, rolling your own was just what you did if you wanted to stretch your money further. Fish and chips, a steak dinner, or a Chinese takeaway for 2 people for a quid. You're talking a massive piece of fish, a pile of chips, mushy peas and gravy, or a decent steak with trimmings, or a full Chinese with rice and beer. The takeaway was a luxury, but it wasn't an expensive one. A Friday night out without going to the pub was within reach of any working man. Today, that same meal costs you 20 to 30 quid, and you're getting smaller portions and lower quality ingredients. Takeaways have become routine for some, while for others, they're still a treat, but a more expensive one. In the 70s, going out for a meal was something to look forward to because it didn't cost the earth. You could afford to do it occasionally without guilt, and the portions were generous because wages and food prices existed in a different ratio altogether. A pound in the 70s was something else entirely. From haircuts to holiday camps, from fish to full roasts, your money went so much further back then. If this took you back, hit that subscribe button and watch the next video on screen. Cheers for watching.